Our word, the topic of our sharing is one more step, an examination on commitment. Today is Easter Sunday, and the Lord has risen from the dead. The sting of death has been lost, and the power of the grave has been overcome. It is now true that nothing can separate us from the love of Christ, not even death. What was meant to be an ultimate victory for evil over good has been thwarted. That morning in the hillside city and garden at the foot of the Calvary was the evidence of so cunningly displayed for all who cared to see. The stone had been rolled away, the tomb was empty, the burial clothes lay in the empty grave, and two angels were there to ensure that the grave was witnessed before they melted away. I want us to be careful in this analysis because all the occurrences from the triumphal entry, what we today call the Palm Sunday, up to the burial on Good Friday show a masterpiece on commitment shown by Jesus, by his disciples, by the multitudes, by the women followers of Christ, by the Jewish leaders, and by the Roman government, although the last two mistakenly. Each of these groups exhibited their own zeal and commitment, and this is all that Easter is supposed to be about. Mary's story, Mary Magdalene, is a story of a person who we can call a Johnny came lately, and perhaps the outsider who mourned louder than the bereaved. Why? Because she had get crushed into the party at Simon the leper's house, which was attended by nobles of Bethany and other ne'er-do-wells. Her past as a woman of easy virtue did not endear her to many, and she had to break loose that afternoon into the party. She had been drawn to Christ, and then the Bible says on Matthew 26 verse 7 that came a woman with an alabaster box of very precious oil and broke it. This was an object of very high value, perhaps carrying all her lifetime savings. And because she did not have a towel, she used her hair to wipe the feet of Jesus, and then she fell to constantly kiss the feet of Jesus. Now, this is an act that brought indignation among the disciples of Jesus and many other people who were at that party. But Jesus was so impressed and said that at that very moment, because she had loved much, her many sins had been forgiven, and that whatever she had done that evening would always be said in memory of her wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world. This was an unparalleled show of devotion, commitment, and zeal, and unrestrained daringness that Jesus could not ignore. This unqualified zeal is what is expected of every believer during Easter. Then the Bible says in chapter 20 verse 1 that on the first day of the week, she was the first at the tomb. Now this again is commitment. When Christ was buried on Friday afternoon, she was the last to leave the crucifixion site. Then the whole Passover, the Sabbath day, her mind was elsewhere, thinking about what she would do on the resurrection morning. So on Sunday morning, she was the first at the tomb again, this time carrying spices to anoint the body of her Lord. She was quite oblivious of personal safety, being the first, and she's going alone. Number 3, she ran after that to Simon Peter and to the other disciples, verse 2 of chapter 20, to come and give them a testimony of what she had seen. My brothers and my sisters, the Bible says about testimony that you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Revelation 12 verse 11. Now, she had seen an apparition. She had seen a sight that was not expected. So she was coming to bear witness and to show testimony. Now, that is a show of commitment. The Christian duty does not require us to be slothful or sluggish. Then, number 4, chapter 20, verse 11, the Bible says that she stood outside the sepulchre weeping. Now, what was she supposed to do? The others had left, having witnessed the empty sepulchre, but there she remained tarrying there alone, crying there alone. Now, she was in essence dwelling in the shelter of the Most High, and therefore she was resting on the shadow of the Almighty. And therefore she was sure that the Almighty was her refuge and her fortress, and therefore she would be saved from the fowler's snare and the deadly pestilence. Psalms chapter 91 and verse 1. Now that is all that keeps us away from danger. When we are oblivious of personal danger and we trust on the Almighty to keep us from the snares and from the pestilences. When we abide in the presence of the Almighty, that is what she was seeing. And when she did that, when she abided in the presence of the Almighty, then she was able to see what other people had not seen before. The Bible says in chapter 20, verse 12, that she looked and saw two angels sitting, one at the foot and the other one at the head, where the body of Jesus had lain. When you tarry in the presence of God, then you see things that other people do not see. I want to urge us this Easter to tarry in the presence of the Lord. And when we tarry and we weep, then the Lord sees our afflictions, He hears our cries, and He comes down to heal us and to wipe our tears. Finally, she turned back and saw Jesus. When you tarry in the presence of God, then you see Jesus. You see the Lord Himself. The Bible says in verse 14 of chapter 20, and saw Jesus standing, and she knew her not. Now, when you get to this level, then you have many firsts like Mary had. She was the first to see the angels. Now she's the first to see Jesus because of the commitment that she had. Jeremiah 29 verse 13 says that you shall seek me and find me when you shall seek me with all your heart. Mary had searched, Mary had sought with all her heart, and the Lord had to appear to her. Finally, she's given a message. Commitment enables you to get a message from the Lord. The Bible says in verse 20, in chapter 20 verse 17, that Jesus turned to her and said, don't hold on to me, don't touch me, don't cling on me, because I'm not yet gone to the Father. But meanwhile, go and tell them that I have gone to my Father, who is their Father. I have gone to my God, who is their God. Go to my brethren. So this commitment enables us to become messengers of God, not just witnesses. We become messengers. So she left the burial site that morning, her past not withstanding. She was now a messenger of the Lord. And Easter invites us to come and be messengers of Christ. May the Lord bless you for listening to this sharing. Keep you and bring you to inheritance of the things that He promised to His people who tried in His presence. God bless you. Amen.